Hey everyone, we're here with Michael from Vacuous. Is that right?
Vacuous indeed.
I
That's
was
right. Yeah.
I almost said vacuosity and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
No,
That wouldn't even be the worst one we've had. It's like it's baffled a lot of people. Like Vacuous, I've heard, and yeah, like just people don't know how to pronounce it. But it's something to talk about at least.
that's true. It's a good way to start. Like, how the hell do you
Yeah.
say it?
Yeah.
At least they're not asking you about your name. How do you spell like or how do you say
Yeah.
Mikiel? You're like,
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Yeah.
well, do you go by Michael or Mike?
I go by Michael.
Okay.
Um, Not offended if someone says Mike, but yeah, Michael.
Cool. Just making sure. So Michael, I appreciate you taking time out of your evening over in the UK to come hang out with me in my afternoon so we can chat about Vacuous and In His Blood and all of that good stuff.
It was good. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Rock and roll. So my first question is going to be like what got you into music initially?
Um, Initially, well, I guess. I mean, I didn't come from a particularly musical household in terms of like, my parents didn't play instruments or anything. But my mom would listen to, like Jimi Hendrix, Cream, stuff of her generation. So I guess I always kind of gravitated towards rock, guitar based music. But I didn't really kind of get an active interest in music until I started skateboarding when I was around like 10 or 11. And it kind of the two things came together. It was like hearing the songs that were in skating videos and what people at the skate park were listening to. And like, so I should probably say, like, I have a bit of an international background. I didn't grow up in the UK. I grew up in the south of France, but my parents are American, hence the accent. But at the time, kind of my knowledge of music was like you had rock music and hip hop, and like it was like rock and skating was what I was all about. And it was like this was the early 2000s, so it was like you know I wasn't super discerning. It was like a mishmash of new metal, punk, pop punk, and like some classic stuff like AC/DC, Iron Maiden. Um, And then I just, I guess somewhere around there decided like, oh, guitar is cool. I want to play guitar. My Asked my parents for a guitar. And yeah, they're like, we'll get you an acoustic guitar, stick with that for a year and then we'll see. I was like, oh, I just want to play like heavy riffs. Um,
Like every
and yeah,
kid
then
ever, you know?
I know. So I just ended up playing Metallica riffs on an acoustic guitar and they're like, all right, okay, fine, we get it. Um, but yeah, so they were pretty supportive in that. And yeah, I just gradually made my way into heavier and heavier stuff. Like I didn't really kind of get the distinction between, rock, hard rock, and metal. I think the turning point for me was like, so I was listening to like, Metallica, Judas Priest, but then when I found Slayer, that was kind of like, oh, there's like, yeah, it's like, there's no longer like the pretense of being like nice or like even connected to that rock heritage. It's like this is just
It's right in your
blatantly
face.
evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like so it makes no apologies. So I was like kind of, taken aback by it at first and I was like, no, actually I kind of like this. This is what I'm into. And from there it's just like going down a rabbit hole of more and more extreme stuff. Around that time, kind of again, taking it back to the skate park, I met some older kids who knew I played guitar and they invited me to join the band and they were into black metal, which I'd never heard of at the time. So I was like 13, 14-year-old kids asked and they were asking me to play like Dark Throne and Mayhem covers and stuff. And I was like, this is so extreme. Surely it's illegal. Like surely you're not allowed to play this kind of
Right.
stuff. Um, and it was kind of like I had a love-hate thing with it for a while, but still it was like opened my eyes to like how far you could go in terms of extremity with this music.
Yeah, it's
And yeah,
wild to
I
think
mean,
about how far some of those bands take. And then, you mentioned Mayhem and they have probably the craziest history out of all like
Yeah,
every band ever, you know?
yeah. And especially at that time, like I wasn't familiar with them like by word of mouth or anything. So I'd hear them from these older kids and like come home and go on Wikipedia and be like, they did what? Like how is this like a thing?
Yeah.
But it's just so it's been so normalized that you kind of used to see someone in a Mayhem t-shirt now and you don't really bat an eye.
Yeah, no, I actually saw them live for the first time. I guess 23 and 23, and
Yeah,
it was God, it was a great bill. It was Cannibal Corpse, Mayhem, Gore Guts, and Blood Incantation.
nice.
Holy shit, man. I was like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah. They've gotten really good live in recent years. They didn't always used to be good. Like I've seen them through the years and it's been a bit hit and miss, but they seem to like have their shit together now.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. So, obviously, Vacuous plays pretty heavy fucking death metal, um,
Mm.
which I thoroughly enjoy. You didn't see it because I've been in the way, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, Cannibal Corpse. Yeah, I mean that was like I'm pretty sure that was the first death metal band I was aware of just from seeing their logo on t-shirts. Can't say I clicked with them initially. I was just like, this is too insane. Um, Death metal for me, I think um, the first band I really, appreciated was Vader. I mean, they're not like a favorite band of mine or anything, but
right.
because of that Slayer connection, it's like you've got Slayer, which is like, Rain and Blood, and then you just take it up a notch and add like blast beats, and it's like
Yeah.
you're kind of there, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So it
funny.
wasn't such a huge leap of like, Corpse felt too extreme point in my life.
Right. Well, and it's funny. I think um, a lot of people's tastes do that, right? They find that one connection to get them just a little bit heavier. And then
Mm,
from there, there's another connection that gets them into something that's just a little bit more heavier and it just before long, you're like, how is everyone in
yeah,
drop C and playing the fucking lowest thing ever? Like, what's going on here?
yeah. Another one I should shout out is actually like so I mentioned I grew up in France and Gojira were like so they're huge now, but back then, this is like 2005, they were just kind of beginning to be a blip on people's radar and I
Yeah.
think they put out that album From Mars to Sirius and that was like in France that was a big deal and I guess it kind of caught on internationally, but they were name dropping Morbid Angel in interviews. And then I was like, oh, Morbid Angel, I gotta check this out. And that's the one that really clicked for me where I'm like, oh, this is like it yeah, like it has that connection to the thrashier thing, but
Mhm.
it's so like otherworldly. It just comes from this like completely to me at that point, just like
Oh
I'd never
yeah.
heard anything like that.
Well, I think when you're first introduced to something like that, you always go through that like, holy shit, what is this? Like, and
Yeah.
there are going to be those bands that it takes a couple of listens to really get it, or it takes
Mm,
seeing them live, and then there are other bands where it's like you just hear it and you're like, oh, all right,
mm,
this is it.
yeah. And sometimes you need to know like sometimes you'll come across something and it won't click and then you kind of appreciate the context of that band a bit more and then it will click for you. I'm kind of like that where I sort of like I like knowing kind of in a really nerdy like encyclopedia way where a band fits in the wider like like Celtic Frost, like one of my favorite bands. Took me years to get into them because I was like, they're not a black metal band. They're not what I expected them
Right.
to sound like. And now I'm like, oh, okay, they're before all that. I get it.
Yeah, then you've got Venom and going back to, those early days, those early 80s, a lot of those bands, obviously the influence is huge. And I think now, probably obviously, maybe, I don't know, there's a much grander appreciation for that era of music than I think
Yeah.
there ever has been.
Yeah, and I think like what makes those bands special, and it's like you can't really pigeonhole them in one specific genre, is that like obviously they're operating at a time when there wasn't that distinction of like this is black metal, this is death metal, this is
Yeah.
whatever. Um, it's just like whatever they were into at that time, they're just like pushing it to the extreme. And I think like that's something that stuck with me, and it's it you know not we don't like consciously try to do that in Vacuous, but I think that is kind of the what drives us in terms of like, hey, we can throw in we're all into this kind of like black metal or punk or whatever. Doesn't necessarily fit within the mold, but we're into it and we're just going to push it to the extreme, and that's what holds it together is that kind of extremity.
Well, how, and how cool is that? Like with music, especially now, there are so many different influences from so many different genres getting mixed that that it's it keeps the music fresh. You know what I mean? It's
Mm,
not the same riffs over and over and over again. And like your Dreams of Dysphoria, that opening track, it's so different than almost everything else that you guys do. It's fucking great. What is it? Devotion, I think.
devotion, yeah.
What a, it's such a good song, and what a way to like really open up an album for fans that were familiar with your work up until that point. It's like, oh, hold on, they're throwing something new in here. Like this is fucking cool.
Yeah, I don't think at the time we realized like how different that was to like our previous EP. And now I'm like, oh, that was a really slow song to open the album with. But yeah, I mean for us we were just kind of in that rabbit hole of like, you know, the like that death doom, like spectral voice, disembowelment thing. And it just felt like that's what we wanted to it just felt like,
About
yeah,
right.
this is an opener right here. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really cool. Like I I went through all the discography on Spotify, demo and everything, and it's um watching you all as a band grow is really cool through that, through all your music and that, obviously I mentioned it because to me it really it really stood out. It's so different. I was just like, man, this is fucking holy shit, this is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
that's one we it's that one's definitely resonated with people, and we stopped playing it live for a bit, and it's the only time someone's come up to us and been like, "Why did you not play that song?" No one's ever requested anything else, but that one seems to have stood out to people.
you're like, okay, I guess we got to put that back in the fucking set list.
Yeah.
What a good problem to have, though. At least they're paying attention enough to be like, hey, dude, we really want you to hear this
Yeah.
song.
Well, you never know, like, if people actually, especially when in this kind of music, it's so like abrasive and over the top that like you don't know if people are just like just there for the extremity of it and it's just a bunch of noise, or if they're actually like paying attention to what you're playing. So it is nice when someone comes up and says that.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. So, up until now, what has your like touring schedule looked like?
Pretty light, to be honest. And that's not because we don't want to, but it's just, the realities of us all having various day jobs and commitments. So we've mainly played around the UK at this point. We've done like some one-off overseas things, but we're hoping that, with this new one we'll do some more touring. We've got a UK tour coming up this year, and then some like festivals in Europe dotted around later on in the year. But yeah, we'll see.
Okay, well, Europe, everyone says Europe's got the is the place to go for festivals, so
Yeah.
it's a
I
good
mean,
good place to be.
yeah, obviously we'd love to do more, but I think there's something about like I think we quite like being a bit of like a rare animal, like when we are conscious as well, especially like in the UK and like London, which is where we've played more than anywhere else, like not saying yes to everything and being like, if you maybe turn stuff down and then actually play the shows you want to play, then people will pay attention to that, and you kind of people are more excited to see you rather than like, oh, you've been the opener for every touring band's like we've seen you
Yeah.
3 weekends in a row. Like,
Yeah. I mean, and that's a decision I think that a lot of like local bands or, smaller bands don't understand. They're like, shit, throw us on every show. And after a
mm,
while, it's, even from the fans' perspective, I could love the band to death. And if I've seen you 5 times this month, I don't want to go see you again. Like there's going to be other
yeah.
shows that you want to hit.
I think there's a fine line. Like, there's a time in your development where like it's appropriate for you to do that because you want to build up that like confidence and just like there's growing pains in any band when you
Yeah.
start playing live. So you kind of want to get play enough to overcome that, but then you need to realize like, okay, maybe it's time to rein it in a bit and be selective about what you play.
But yeah, I mean, when you guys start getting like noticed from labels and things like that, I think at that point it's maybe even a little before that, when
Mm,
when you notice the crowd, you've got a big crowd for you. It's like awesome. Like a lot of people showed up. We don't need to come and play next week or Tuesday or
mm.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And like our kind of golden rule is like we try to play the shows that we would enjoy being at as fans. Because at the end of the day, like, this isn't our job, so we still need to like make tons of arrangements. Like you got to practice, um, find a way to get to the venue on time on a weeknight, that kind of thing. So it's like whether it's a show that you want to or not, the same amount of work goes into. So may as well make it kind of count. It's like we were at one point like we were getting a lot of interest from like this promoter in London who was putting on like beat down hardcore shows, and it was like us and a bunch of beat down bands, and we're like, that's great that like somehow our music is translating to you and like we really appreciate it, but you know this is not for us kind of,
Yeah.
and it's fine to say that.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, you see it a lot. I mean, we see it a lot here, people in that I would consider more like the death metal are playing with a lot of beatdown bands, and it's such a
Mm,
I'm not opposed to it because I like both sides of it, but there's of course that balance too is like, what shows are coming up, and is that the crowd we need to be in front of or want to be in front of, or is there another band that we want to play with that the crowd would be a
yeah,
better fit for us too.
yeah, yeah, I gather that that's quite big in the States, that kind of crossover with like sort of heavier hardcore and I guess more moshable death metal bands. It's there's a bit of it here. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, we're not purists. We in the band we all have varying appreciations for hardcore, but I think, you know, what we realized after having done a few of their shows is like we're not all like those shows, those audiences, like whether your music is kind of moshable is what determines if a show is good or not. And it's like that's not something we entirely feel comfortable with,
Sure.
if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we got obituaries coming through here in a couple of months. Fucking love
Yeah.
obituary. They're playing with nails and terror, and it's like, man, that show is going to be fucking violent.
Yeah. Yeah. You might want to stand at the back for that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I'm like I'll be hanging out by the merch booth. I don't need to get in a pit. I'm too old now.
Yeah.
Shit's
Yeah. I
wild.
mean, it's cool though that, we're at a place where there is that mutual appreciation between audiences, and it feels healthy. But at the same time, I think it's all right to know what's good for you and what's not.
Agreed. Yes. I'd agree with that. So what with In His Blood, um, what did the writing process look like for you guys?
So in terms of like the process itself, it's usually like we're not a band that writes in the rehearsal room. There's a lot of like bedroom demoing, and then like so usually like I'll fiddle with riffs come up with a loose structure, like send it to the guys for feedback, and then when it's all we're all kind of like in agreement that this is something that is worth our time to work on, then we'll get in the rehearsal room and hash it out. So that's sort of the general process. Within His Blood, I think the initial drive for me was like, I think that you were talking about devotion and sort of that really gloomy death doom thing. I think
Yeah.
I really deliberately wanted to go in the opposite direction, and wanted to do something really immediate and like kind of have that spontaneous feel to it. So the first songs we wrote were like the really like sort of short, punky ones, like like the title track. Um, and I think one thing I found as I was writing is that um, having like more conventional song structures with like a verse and a chorus and like a very deliberate hook, it felt really refreshing because coming from Dreams of Dysphoria, which is like intentionally kind of, you know, weaving free form kind of death doom stuff, which is what we wanted to do at the time. It just felt like a breath of fresh air in terms of songwriting for us.
Yeah.
And I think just as the writing for In His Blood went on and on, just kind of the amount of influences that kind of started creeping into the songs just kept growing and growing. Um, but it still felt somehow cohesive at the end of the day. And no one's kind of checked us on it yet. Like there's some gothy post-punk stuff that snuck in there, which we're pretty. Have you heard the whole record, by the
I
way?
haven't. No. I've only
Okay,
heard In
all
His
right.
Blood.
I won't give too much away then.
No, no, give it away. Give it away. Um, I'm here for it. I went through, I was looking for the promo album and I don't think it's been sent out yet. I think it'll probably get sent out like
Okay,
next week. And I was like,
cool.
oh man, I want to hear all of this now. But so that's cool. Like consciously, you were trying to go the opposite way of Dreams of Dysphoria. Like the finished product, do you feel like it hit the mark for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's always things that you listen back to and you're like, I wish we could have done that differently. And yeah, there's that's just how it is with any record. But I think if anything, it's like I'm really happy with how honest the record sounds. Like there's a lot of flaws on it, and we kind of made the decision to not like might comb through everything and edit all the mistakes out. Not it's not recorded to a click track, so there's a lot of push and pull in terms of the tempos. But I think it sounds a lot closer to how we actually sound as a band in the room, and I'm kind of happy that we got to that point. I think Dreams of Dysphoria, like in terms of a songwriting exercise and recording, I'm happy with how it came out. It came out pretty much exactly how we envisaged, but I think we walked away from it being like, that's not exactly how we sound as a band, like in the room. So that was a consideration for this one, and I think we definitely got that
That's
on In
cool.
His Blood.
I think that's really hard for a band to do, you know, like do something, record something and get the feel that like we're in the practice room still. We're
Yeah,
playing it. It feels really good.
yeah. And there's like a middle ground between like obviously, we listen to stuff that's like, raw rehearsal recordings and that's cool, but there's a limit to like what you can convey, I find, as a band. So it's like trying to expand like being able to have different tones and layerings and things and different production tricks, but also keeping that essence of like it's five guys in a room and there's feedback and maybe this fill isn't as loud as it should be and maybe I didn't hit that right note, but you get the vibe kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that it's the feeling that you really want to convey, and that feeling is when you have, I think, the right producer, the right engineer, and the band itself is really like just on it for that time.
Mm.
Um, it
Yeah.
takes all of those things to be able to really convey that.
Yeah. Well, I think it took us a little while to get there, just like in our trajectory as a band, because like we had a bit of an unconventional like sort of development in terms of the timing, just because we formed in like late 2019, put our demo out, was it March, April 2020, and then like just about when lockdown hit, yeah. So the follow-up, like the EP and then the full length, it was kind of written in that COVID like mentality. We didn't get to meet up a lot and just hash things out in the room. So it was like we were writing together but remotely. Obviously we rehearsed before doing Dreams of Dysphoria and everything, but um, it was only like we started playing shows in 2021, so that's like 2 years into the band being around that we kind of were like, oh, this is how we sound. This is what we sound like as a unit. Um, so what, and I think we recorded Dreams of Dysphoria like shortly after starting to play shows, so we hadn't really figured out what the dynamic was in terms of like just that in the room chemistry. I think
Yeah,
songwriting we were there, but not in terms of how we actually sound. So I think we nailed that one in his blood.
that's cool. That's cool. That's really cool to hear. Like it sounds like the development of the band has, I'm not even going to say slow. I think that's about how it should be. Bands
Mm,
get together, they shouldn't be out there immediately playing shows unless they have, tons of
yeah,
like live history behind them. So, maybe that lockdown did some good for you guys.
I think so. I think like we had the demo out and like had shows been available then, we would have played them. And if you'd heard our like very first demo, it's super primitive. It's like what we were able to come up with like in the rehearsal room together. Like that was kind of the process at that point. And we probably would have continued down that road and like geared our stuff towards like, oh, what's easy for us to like hash out in a couple hours and then throw in a live set. But having that lockdown and that not being a possibility meant that like we we focused on our writing chops more than like what's this going to sound like live. And so that's that. And one thing which I should mention is that our singer Joe at the time, on the first two releases of the band, he was actually doing drums and vocals. So it wasn't until we like recorded our EP Catabasis that we then got together and like started practicing that stuff. And we are like, yeah, we've kind of like moved beyond what, no disrespect to his drumming or singing, like what we can accomplish in this format. And that's when we got, you know, Joe just started focusing on vocals and we got another drummer in. Same thing with guitar. We're like, we need a second guitarist. So we didn't compromise. We're like, these are the songs we want to write. Let's give ourselves the means to accomplish them, like by getting people into the band and putting in the work with them.
That's, that's cool. I think all too often bands tend to compromise just to maybe speed things up a little more. And not even bands, but like, businesses too. They'll cut a corner here so they can
Mm,
make a little bit of progress. And when you start compromising and cutting corners, you end up taking, more steps back and almost having to like start over. So like no compromise, getting what you need and staying the trajectory on where you want to go is it's really
mm.
hard to do. So kudos to you guys for making that happen.
Yeah. I mean, always going to be a limit to like what any band can do, and it's not like I'm not going to give you some like sky's the limit bullshit on what to expect from Vacuous. It's going to be a bunch of noisy stuff.
Dude,
Anyway,
but I'm gonna tell you the sky's the limit because I wholeheartedly believe that when you have bands like, you know, Cannibal Corpse playing where'd they play? They played Red Rocks last year. It was like,
that's pretty crazy. Yeah,
yeah, like come on, like Red Rocks, Madison Square Garden, for us,
yeah,
those are the
yeah. Of
places
course.
to play. So fuck, if you could take some dirty old death metal and get them into places like that, fuck, sky's the limit for you guys too.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think those bands have the benefit of being kind of like founding fathers, which is never going to happen again. I think on the one hand that's good because everyone can kind of do their own thing, but um, yeah, I don't see, once those bands like Cannibal Corpse and Carcass and stuff, when they're gone, I don't really see bands ever stepping into that kind of position. Same
Hmm.
same thing with metal in general. I don't know, like, or it will be something that I'm not familiar with or not into. It will be some metalcore or some, gen or something more modern.
I don't know. I mean,
But
like if we look at the history of metal, the biggest metal bands now, the two biggest are like Metallica and Iron Maiden, you know,
yeah,
like no one matches
yeah,
them. But if if we look at, sorry, phone's all of a sudden going nuts. I should have turned it on DND. But what are they doing? They're bringing other bands up with them, and if yes, like Cannibal Corpse, Carcass, they're definitely founding fathers. But if you don't think there aren't other bands that will get to that level and or beyond, then then I
yeah.
I
I-
don't
It's
think
it's
you're
not
seeing.
it's
Go ahead.
yeah. I think what I'm trying to say is like it's just like because they've been around for so long and it's like just the amount of clout that a name like Cannibal Corpse has, it's like with I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll have this conversation in 20 years' time and you'll be like, I told you so.
Yeah, I hope so.
Maybe. But
I don't think I'll be
but
alive in 20 years, but whatever.
don't say that.
I'm old, dude. Like I'm almost 50. So like if I have 20 years, awesome, but I don't think I'll be around that long.
I mean, I don't know. Um, how old was Lemmy made it 70, 75? So yeah, I
It
guess,
was so
I don't know how
yes,
rock and roll a lifestyle you lead.
it's been a rough road. I'm not quite at Lemmy level, but well, we'll see. My wife seems to think I'm going to die in like the next 5 years. I mean, at least from what she tries to get me to eat, that's what she thinks. Like, I don't want to eat that. Give me the
Yeah,
Yeah, give me something
yeah,
nasty to eat. Whatever.
yeah.
Uh,
That's like taste versus health is like the opposite diagram. It like crosses over like that,
yeah.
doesn't it?
So whatever. I do hope I think I wholeheartedly believe that just music in general, whether it be death metal or pop or whatever, it's on a trajectory to just constantly increase. I mean, the population growth of the world is we just keep getting,
Hmm.
bigger and bigger. And with that, there's going to be more people who are interested in it, which are going to fill more
Yeah,
clubs and play more places.
yeah. I mean, that's I wish I was like that optimistic about it. I'm not sure I am, but on the other hand, it's not like all doom and gloom either. Like I think for me, the fact that I feel like we're in an era now, like the era of sort of like big trends in metal at least is over. Like I can't, I'm not sure what the last one was. Was it metalcore? Was it gent? Like where there was sort of this thing that like took over the media and sort of you'd look at
I think,
festivals and that was like what was pushed to the forefront.
yeah, I would
And there's
say
probably like a
metalcore,
pressure.
deathcore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure at that time there would have been some kind of pressure from like record labels being like, you might want to get those ear stretchers and you might want to like cut your hair and you might want to make your logo fluo green or something like that if you want to sell. Whereas I don't think there's any, I may be wrong, but it doesn't feel that way. It just feels like some bands do well, some don't do as well, and it's kind of like you can do what you want. There's not that like pressure to look or sound a certain way in metal.
Yeah, I think they kind of, gave up on that a long time ago, with you have to look this way. And part of that is like the accessibility, since in the internet age, it's very, very different than when I was growing up, and when I was growing up, God, I hate saying that. Back in my day, um, there was a lot of like tape trading going on. So when you were gonna
Mm,
find a band, like if you wanted to find a band like Cannibal Corpse back in the early 90s, you you had to know someone that knew about
mm,
them that was going to turn you on to them. I mean, I've I don't have near the tapes that I used to have, but I'm sure I still have tons of tapes that I got in the mail with just hosts of bands from death metal to like indie rock, and it's like you listen and you don't know what's coming up next, and you're like, oh shit, what is
Yeah.
that? But in the internet age, everything's at our fingertips. So
Mm.
a band, in my opinion, a band doesn't necessarily need a record label if they have the right team around them and the drive to make it happen. Because
Yeah. That.
they're those things, the the drive, the hard work, there is nothing that will ever match that. So as a band, if a band wants to, like, I'm just going to say, make it big for lack of a better term, you get
Mm.
out there and grind the road, and yeah, there's going to be some really fucking hard days where you're like, shit, we're not eating today, but
Yeah.
in the end, you'll see, I think the payoff is so worth it. So the labels notice that and go, you know what? They could do it without us. Let's keep,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. That is an interesting point. That kind of labels are kind of self-aware enough to sort of. It's like they're like, yeah, do it without us, and then we'll talk about it. Yeah, I get that. But yeah, on the flip side of that, it's I think it is also harder for bands to like cut through and get people's attention because there's so much out there. And like you say, it's at your fingertips. And like there's a bit of an age gap within our band. So I'm the oldest. And so I didn't grow up during the tape trading era, but like I still had a fairly analog experience getting into music. And it was CDs when I was growing up,
yeah,
and like where I grew up, like the local library had this like media section that for some reason was pretty well stocked in metal. So I would go in and like borrow CDs and burn them on my computer or burn a copy of the CD. And that's how I would get my music. But it was like there's still this notion that there's like a finite amount of music that you have access to in that moment, and it's like you're going to engage with it differently. Um, like you had that tape that your friend would give you, and you're like, I'm in my car. This is all I can listen to. So it might not grab me immediately, but I'm going to listen to it over and over again, and then maybe it will click.
yep,
It's harder to get people to do that now because if you don't get them right away, then they're on to exactly. So
yep,
I think
yeah.
it's not it's a double-edged thing.
You are absolutely right. It's a lot harder to really break through all the noise that's out there on the internet, which is where, that hard work really comes in. That payoff. I mean, I'm for me, if a band isn't good live, it'll never, like, I don't want to listen to them. I don't want to go see them. You know what I mean? So if you're out there grinding and putting it in and the band is crushing it live, the fans, the people in the crowd notice that, and they do things like, hey man, I wish you'd play that song live, and you're like, oh fuck,
Mm,
all right,
yeah,
which is it's great. But without that, if you're just putting music out into the, on the internet, like going, yep, someone's going to listen to it, well, hold on, you, there's only so many people who will
mm,
give that a chance,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. No, no, and yeah, as you say, like it's a lot of hard work, and it's people see that, and it's nice when they do. But like I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't sort of mention the fact that a lot of where we are now is, you know, a result of us kind of being at the right place in the right place at the right time. You know, we're mainly based in London and operate in London, and it's like I sometimes talk with bands that are in more remote areas of the country, and it's kind of like just the amount of opportunities that we get presented versus what they get is like it's night and day. And like just even the talking about the relapse thing. So we have a really good relationship with this record shop in East London called Crypto the Wizard. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
Mhm.
it's a label and record shop. And in his basement, basically, there's a recording studio, which is where we did the album, where we did In His Blood. And it's just like it just so happened that he had a relation with Relapse because I guess he buys wholesale for his shop. And one of the reps was on a trip to London and stopped by and I was like, you know, chatting with Charlie, the owner of the shop, and said like, "Oh, are there any good bands in the UK that we should be aware of?" And it's like, "Oh, matter of fact, there's a band, a death metal band that's mixing their album downstairs right now, kind of thing." And that's what put us on their radar. So it's like there's a lot of small things, that a band can be grinding just as hard as you, or maybe harder, and they won't get that little leg up, and then that will kind of have a ripple effect in terms of how well a band does.
Well, I can I can understand, that perspective. I also believe that if a band is out there grinding and doing those things, those opportunities are going to pop up because the
Mm,
people who enjoy that music, they're going to show up for the shows, right? And then you might be out there on a headline tour where you've got 10 people showing up each night, or, good night's 25 people, and you're like, all right, cool.
yeah.
After, however many of those, then you get the opportunity to go out with a bigger band. Well, shit, when you're out with a bigger band, you're open to more people. Reps are showing up to that bigger band show, right?
Mm,
So it's both of those things play a role, and having someone that believes in you guys enough to say, "Hey, check these guys out." When you're checking on someone, like, hell yeah, that happens. It happens a lot. That's
mm,
that's I think that's where most of these relationships come from, is it's I'm gonna call it a warm introduction. Hey, check out
yeah.
this band that I'm familiar with and they're really good. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the right sound and someone that can vouch for them, where they trust their taste.
Yeah. Yeah, and that doesn't mean that like that's the approach you need to take of like I need to know the right people, like I need to network, I need to, kiss this guy's ass because he's gonna introduce me to whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think as you say, just work hard and be yourself and yeah, hope for the
Yeah.
best, really.
And I mean, and it really depends on what the band wants out of it too, because
Exactly. Yeah.
like getting out there and grinding 300 days a year is not necessarily, it's not made
Mm,
for every band. And it's okay, dude. It's okay if they want to play 2 shows a year and release albums every, 5
yeah.
years or whatever that is, or there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And as you probably got from what I was saying earlier, that's, us being on the road year round is not something we're after. We want to balance this with our home lives, and
sure.
yeah, we we want to keep this like a fun outlet,
Yeah.
whilst doing it at a higher level. That's kind of all we're aiming to achieve at this point,
Yeah.
and writing stuff that we're genuinely into and that we don't feel like we've had to compromise in any way.
I think that's really cool. It's really awesome that you guys have, that ethical standard. Like, this is what we want. We want to have a good home life and a fun outlet with the band. I think people will compromise one for the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's never, in the past couple of years, there's not been a single day where I haven't done something during the day that's connected to the band, whether it's like, an interview, an email, or just thinking about a song. But so it's like a huge part of all of our lives, but it's like the fact that this is not what is ultimately going to determine whether I can pay my electricity bill at the end of the month. It's like it
Not
feels like
yet.
a burden is kind of like taken away. So
Yeah.
I can't, oh, I don't know. On the other hand, like not having other constraints and just being able to kind of like live and breathe your music, maybe that's great. But um, I imagine that's something I would have maybe enjoyed if I was 10 years younger. I'm in my 30s now, but so
Yeah. You're getting old
feels
now
like,
too.
yeah, well, I'm still young enough for certain things, but definitely too old for others is how I see it.
Yeah. That's the
I'm
truth.
I'm also I'm not in the mosh pit either. I'll
Yeah.
be at the merch table with you at the obituary
Yes.
show.
I'm totally cool with that. Listen, the last mosh pit I got in, I fucked my shoulder up. I had to have surgery.
Yeah,
And that
so you don't
that
do that
was
twice.
no, that was 15 years ago. I'm like, cool, I'm done.
Mm,
God, sucks
yeah,
getting old. God, it
it
sucks
happens to
getting
all of
old.
us though,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, most of us, yeah. So, obviously with In His Blood coming out on the 28th, do you guys have any like goals or thresholds that you're hoping that it meets over the next year or so?
Um, I mean, obviously like we're all a bit like kind of anxious like let's hope this does well because it's on a much bigger platform than we've had before. In terms of what we're aiming to achieve, I think just well getting our name out there, but I think with this record in particular, and I appreciate you haven't heard all of it yet. But there are some like creative risks that we've taken, I feel like, and some we've opened ourselves up to, I think, a broader range of influences. And I think hopefully people will appreciate that and that will set kind of a precedent for like, what are they going to, like we appreciate bands. This is what we talk about with our singer Joe, like that have a distinct kind of era with each album.
Yeah.
Like you look at Carcass, like, they from the early, really messy gore grind stuff to kind of the middle of the road, like necroticism, and then like Heartwork is this just like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, Swan Song's cool. It's not my favorite, but I'll give it a listen now and again. But basically where it's like you don't know exactly what you're going to get, but I'm interested enough to check it out. So that's kind of I'm hoping people will have that mindset when they hear our name. That's if we can kind of get that level of interest out of people, I'd be really happy. I'm not
Yeah.
expecting everyone to come along on the journey with us, but
I
if
I
people
think
can
you're
like
going to be
engage with it.
surprised. I really think that you'll be surprised because it's, if we look at Carcass or even like Deftones, right?
Mm,
Some of those softer bands I think when the band sets that precedent early, every album it has like the band sound, but
mm,
it's different, right? Like obviously with Deftones, you've got Chino, who is that
mm.
consistent through, but you
Like
listen,
anchors it, yeah.
yeah, you listen to any song off of any album and like, oh, that's off of, the self-titled in '03, and that's off of, White Pony or whatever. Like they have each album has a very distinct sound, and I think you guys are going right there, especially listening to, Dreams of Dysphoria and, the earlier Catabasis and the demo, and then, In His Blood. I think each each album has like you said,
Mm,
different influences, but it's its own unique sound that is consistent with the
yeah.
band.
I think there's two kinds of bands and like neither is better than the other. But like back to Cannibal Corpse where like essentially, they've got a formula and they've like perfected it and stuck to it for years and years. And I think that's really cool in that like you get a new album and you're like, I'm just looking for a fresh set of Cannibal Corpse songs. Like I'm not expecting them to like go somewhere new and blow my
don't
mind and kind
don't
of
break
like
the mold.
feel these
Yeah.
all these yeah, exactly, these weird emotions I'm not used to experiencing.
Yeah.
um but just thinking about us like as a band and it's like I don't think we would feel entirely like fulfilled doing that. And I think it's like there's just so many things that we want to keep bringing into the band in terms of like just influences from different members and like different types of we still feel like there's stuff we haven't done. And I feel like if we were in that kind of like this is our sound and let's not deviate from it, I don't think I'd feel particularly like
Fulfilled.
accomplished or honest
Yeah.
doing that. So
Yeah, but I think like you said, is there's not a wrong way to go about it. The bands that like do the same thing, like AC/DC, Cannibal Corpse, they there's nothing wrong with that. And there is also nothing wrong with bands pushing the envelope and bringing in new influences and trying new
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. And like we're under no pretense that like I've just been talking about doing different things on each album. I'm under no illusion that like what Vacuous has to offer is in any way like original or innovative, like or different to anything that's come before us. It's just like at the end of the day, it's just personal to us, and we
Sure.
feel accomplished doing it, and that's all we can aim for, really.
Shit, dude, in today's world, it's hard to be like original and innovative. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
dude, we're hundreds of years into music, and we're what, 4 or 5 decades into heavy metal.
Hmm.
Like like how do you really push the envelope?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it's David Lynch who said it. I may be misquoting, but I think in an interview he got asked like, has everything already been said in cinema? And he's like, yeah, that's absolutely true, but not by you. And it's like that's it. Ultimately that's is how much of yourself you kind of willing to put into your music that's gonna set it apart from your peers, I
for
think.
sure. That's fucking cool. All right. So the big question that I have is, do you guys want to come tour the States?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to. It's not financially an easy thing to do
Sure.
for a band at our level. I mean, there's obviously travel, there's visas for some of us, but yeah, I mean, if it's the right opportunity comes up and we're not hemorrhaging money doing it, we'd love to. And yeah, hopefully, with Relapse being based over there, that'll open that door
For
hopefully
sure.
fairly soon. We'll
I'm
see.
I'm sure they've got some pretty good bands that would take you guys out on the road that fill clubs already.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's I don't know what else we could really ask for to have that opportunity. Obviously, like I've got family in the States, so I go over most years. So yeah, I'm kind of know what to expect in terms of like audiences and stuff. But yeah, I think it's probably a really different experience doing a full US tour compared to like Europe or the UK, just because of like the distances are so huge. It's like yeah, you
Yeah,
you kind of you don't really realize maybe oh, but for us like doing a 3 hour drive is like takes you like halfway up the country, so like that's you know
I
yeah.
wish.
Yeah,
Like 3 hour drive, you're still in the same state. Like, what's
yeah,
going on here? No.
yeah,
Yeah,
but fingers crossed, we'll make it happen at some point.
for sure. I think a lot of people say that, the difference between touring in the over in Europe versus the US is the drive time.
Mm,
Obviously like East
yeah.
Coast, it's not so bad. You've got, you're looking at sometimes 5 or 6 hours between cities, but then when you start getting out west, you're like 7, 8, 9, 10 hour drives to
Mm,
the next city. Like, oh,
mm, yeah. So we'll see. You mentioned that obituary tour that just got announced. So, some friends of ours from the UK are opening that, a band called Pest Control.
oh,
They're
okay.
like a crossover thrash band from Leeds that we played with a bunch over here, and good friends of ours. Um, so yeah, check them out. They're being taken out by obituary, so that's very cool for them.
That is super cool for them. I'm always there early because I want to see the openers and see what they have to offer. Maybe I will reach out to them and say, let's do an interview, so we can
Mm,
kind of help promote them on that tour.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure they'd be down.
Hell yeah, that's super cool. Well, I appreciate that. Any final thoughts?
Um, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. I hope you enjoy the album when you hear the full thing. And yeah, we'd love to come out and play the States. And yeah, album's
Oh,
out 28th next month, a month today. And yeah, hope everyone likes it.
fuck yeah. Michael, I do greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day. I had a lot of fun chatting with you. I feel like I learned a lot about you, which is really fucking awesome. That's always my goal. Um, I am looking forward to hearing the whole album. I will be I'm not even, I said I will be. I pre-ordered the album about an hour ago. Um,
All right.
so I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Great. Really appreciate that.
Hell yeah. Well, go and have yourself a great night.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take
Thanks.
care.
See ya.